Vice President Dick Cheney now admits that there was never a link between Iraq and the 9/11 attacks, but he insists that the war in Iraq saved lives, and he begins to qualify previous claims that certain classified memos prove that waterboarding worked. Our fourth story in the countdown, Cheney's latest stop on his rewriting history tour, otherwise known as preparing for the possible future war crimes trial. The former vice president, whose office, while he was in power, engineered the outing of CIA agent Valerie Plame after her husband Joe Wilson alleged that the Bush administration had manipulated the pre-war intel. The same Cheney who in September of 2003 on Meet the Press still described a possible Iraq 9/11 connection, even though such a link had by then been widely discredited. That Cheney now blithely saying this.
On the question of whether or not Iraq was involved in 9/11, there was never any evidence to prove that. There was some reporting early on, for example, that Mohammed Atta had met with a senior Iraqi intelligence official, but that was never borne out.
Mr. Cheney even added a little fancy footwork regarding former CIA Director George Tenet.
He did say and did testify that there was an ongoing relationship between al-Qaeda and Iraq, but no proof that Iraq was involved in 9/11.
What have you done with Dick Cheney, and who are you? Meantime, on his favorite subject, waterboarding, Mr. Cheney appears to be recharacterizing the documents that he wants declassified. Listen carefully to this.
Yes, but the way I would describe them is they have to do with the detainee program, the interrogation program. It's not just waterboarding, it's the interrogation program that we used for high-value detainees. And there were 2 reports done that summarize what we learned from that program, and I think they provide a balanced view.
As noted by Greg Sargent at theplumline.com, Mr. Cheney seems to be carefully moving away from his previous claim that those documents would prove that torture worked. Now Cheney is speaking of the interrogation program working, and is a far more inclusive description, which would include results from non-torture techniques as well. You know, like the time we gave the diabetic from al-Qaeda free sugar-free cookies. And there's more. At the National Press Club yesterday on the war in Iraq, quoting Mr. Cheney, "I think it was a sound decision to make. I think it was an important part of our overall strategy in the global war on terror. I think it saved lives." And after the Bush administration essentially ignored repeated warnings prior to 9/11 about al-Qaeda determined to strike within the United States, Mr. Cheney says that former counterterrorism chief Richard Clarke, quote, obviously missed it, and that they, the intel community at large, quote, missed 9/11. Let's call in the co-founder and editor-in-chief of Huffington Post, Arianna Huffington, also co-author of the Huffington Post Complete Guide to Blogging. Arianna, good evening.
Good evening, Keith.
Starting at the end there, this remark about Richard Clarke and the community of the intel community missing 9/11. I don't think you have to be a psychiatrist or a psychologist or even have gone to a night class in psychology to understand the concept of projecting. Dick Cheney is saying, in a sense, I missed 9/11, so let me figure out who I can blame it on, right?
Absolutely. I mean, that was not, though, the most stunning thing among all the things that you quoted him saying. I think for me the most stunning thing was the fact that he still is not willing to say what we all know, which is that there was no evidence linking Saddam Hussein to 9/11. All he's willing to do is be Pontius Pilate and basically wash his hands off the truth, or even perhaps finding the truth. And that is really, in a way, why he continues insinuating that there was a connection, even as recently as his latest speech in front of the AI audience, when he talked about connections between Saddam Hussein and Middle Eastern terrorists, which was all perhaps designed to make people feel, or perhaps these Middle Eastern terrorists were al-Qaeda. I don't know. The character that he most resembles for me in all of literature is Iago. Because remember, Iago was a master manipulator of words to distort reality and create havoc. And that's the only thing for me that can begin to explain Dick Cheney psychologically.
Yes, and he would, and then stepped away at the end and said, "Well, I didn't strangle anybody. It was all your doing, Othello."
It was George Tenet's doing.
Yes, it's become increasingly clear, I think, that the former vice president is on some sort of mission to rewrite each part of the recent history that makes him look bad, makes the Bush administration look bad. even if he's never called to account for the worst of it, even if the long gradient working against the idea of war crimes trials in this country or any other country is never overcome, doesn't it look like he's seeing wolves closing in? He is preparing himself in the event he's tried? Is that not the vibe this gives off?
Maybe, but I'm not sure, because he lives in such a permanent state of denial. And he clearly has a lot of people around him who are supporting that state of denial, including his own daughter. So maybe he's just doing it pure and simple because he does want to protect his legacy. After all, that was the essence of revisionism. As George Orwell said, he who controls the past controls the future. And maybe that's all he's doing, trying to control the past by rewriting history again and again.
Yeah, there's not enough time in this millennium for him to fix the legacy at this point. But this point that Greg Sargent noted, Senator Levin said that those intelligence documents that Cheney keeps pressing to have declassified, they don't do anything to connect the valuable intel to the use of torture. Mr. Cheney has just rejiggered the claim, the terminology of it. We already pretty much established they declassified every other document that could possibly be interpreted as backfilling for all the things and the nefarious things that they did in the administration. If there was anything in the files that said torture worked, Cheney would have leaked it or declassified it already, wouldn't he?
Oh, absolutely. And perhaps he actually realized that he no longer has the power to keep something classified, and that the White House may decide to declassify the documents that he has been claiming would prove the success of waterboarding. And clearly, from everything he has said and others have said, that's not the case. So now he's walking back what he had said about it and making it be about the entire interrogation program.
What happens with these allegations, again, about the intel, about Richard Clark and such, when Clark is willing to come back and describe this as White House 9/11 trauma defense? How does this end for Mr. Cheney?
Well, in a different time, it might have ended better. But right now, we live in the age of YouTube and Google and LexisNexis searches, and it's very much harder to doing this revisionist history. And after all, there is the possibility that this huge pile of lies is going to get so big that it's going to tumble down. And my one immediate hope is that he will be treated like a pariah. After all, that should happen. There is no reason for him to continue to be treated like a public figure with any kind of credibility left, and that will make a big difference in the way the rest of us respond to him.
Ariana Huffington at HuffingtonPost.com. Let's hope so. As always, great thanks, Ariana.
Thank you.